Hi, everybody. So I'd love to just find out, by a show of hands, how many of you have had to plan a workforce reduction or a layoff in some regard? Okay, great. And how many of you have actually had to have that conversation with someone and let them know that their position has been eliminated? It's probably one of the hardest things that we have to do professionally is to let someone know that their job is going away. And one thing that I noticed in my work at RiseSmart, I've spent a lot of time actually on site with customers who have chosen us as their partner. And I noticed that people get really angry, right, about this. They get really angry, and what do you not want them to do when they're angry? Go to Glassdoor, or do any of you look at Glassdoor and see what's going on out there, kind of keeping tabs on what people are saying? I think it's an important thing to do, but it also can get almost, you get kind of freaked out by it too. But one day, a few years ago, I was on site with a customer, and I noticed something different about the people who were being, whose positions were being eliminated, who they were being laid off. They weren't angry. They were sad, but they weren't angry. And I was having a conversation with a woman who said to me, you know, I'm really disappointed that my job is going away, but I get it. I get it. I know that it was an important business decision for this organization. I've worked here for 25 years, and I love this company. And I hope that the company can get healthy again, and maybe someday I could even come back. Isn't that just the absolute ideal response to losing your job? That is what you want every single one of your employees that you have to let go to say about you. And she expressed to me how much she appreciated the support that they were getting through this transition. And so I started looking at what are the absolute worst practices and what are the best practices, including that customer. And Mark has joined me from Caterpillar because I've been incredibly impressed in the 2 years we've been working together. Just their processes are really wonderful. So I think they absolutely adhere to best practices around this. And so I've been doing a lot of research into not just into the customers that have chosen us as their partner, but also the people that they send to us, and asking them, what was good about your experience? What was difficult about it? Why are you angry, or why are you not angry? And I've put together some best practices and 5 things that you can do so that when you do have to lay someone off, they're still saying good things about you in the marketplace. Because what's going to happen to those people that you laid off? One of probably 3 things are the most likely scenarios. They're either going to go to work for one of your competitors, or they're going to go to work for one of your customers or vendors, or at some point in the not too distant future, you may want to hire them back, this whole notion of boomerang employees. And so you want them to be disappointed that their job is going away. I don't think you can get around that. But you want them to feel that you did right by them. So there's 5 things that I've come up with: building a culture of empowerment and transparency, facilitating mobility, communicating authentically to your employees, prioritizing redeployment, which I'm actually going to hand the whole presentation over to Mark for that piece, because they have an amazing program, and then providing transition assistance. So I'm actually going to skip right over this first one because I think there's so many other sessions at this conference that are about this, but I have noticed that the organizations that have a great culture and have a culture of empowerment and trust tend to have better results with having good relationships with people that they let go. And so I think that's really important. So if you're looking at that, obviously, there's many other benefits to having a great culture, but this is another one. So facilitating mobility. This is, again, something way before the layoff. It needs to be part of the organization. And I think it's important to really think about this. I can't tell you how many of our customers have told me that it's harder to find a job inside their organization than to look for a job outside the organization. If they want to make a career move, they have to look outside because there's too much red tape to look for a job here at this company. And so you lose great people by not making that easy. And there's things you can do with technology, there's things you can do with learning and development that can really, and especially training your managers to not think about employees as people that they own, right? Do you ever notice that your employees think these people report to me and I own them and no one else gets to use them, right? And you don't want that. You want your managers to be developing employees and encouraging them, you know what, hey, I think your talents have gotten so strong that you might be better over in this other group. And then that's good for the manager because they start to be seen as someone who develops people. So, and Mark, I know you guys have a great program around this too, so if you want to touch on that.
I'll talk a little bit about this. Outside of our placement process, we annually do performance management reviews, but we also annually do career development. And the career development piece is we ask every employee to look at their career and what do you want to do in 10 years? And in that 10 years, what jobs do you think will get you there? And we ask them to come up with 2 or 3 plans. Now, odds are, like I look at my job today, as corporate HR manager, if I would have said 10 years ago, it wouldn't even have been on my list probably, because you don't really know. But it gives you an idea of what you want to do. So it also helps us when it comes to a situation where jobs have gone away, employees have thought about what do they really want to do, where do they want to go, what do they want to grow to. So when we sit down and talk to them, it's not starting at step 1. They've always thought about what do I want to do going down the line. The other piece we have, when I look at technology, we have over 250 facilities, I believe, in the US and several hundred around the globe. We used to tend to think, well, this job's being eliminated, so now what do we do? Well, now it's becoming very apparent, obviously, that if you have an engineer doing a job in Peoria, Illinois, where I'm from, but we have another engineering job available in San Francisco, it could probably be done remotely. We don't even have to move the person. We can probably keep them there doing the job and be very successful. So we've really started to try to adapt those things as well as we go through.
Yeah, great, thanks. So how many of you have formal internal mobility programs? So I see 3 hands, 4 hands, so not too many. I think this is going to become more and more important as we go, especially, I know there's a lot of talk about generations and millennials, and that people are having shorter and shorter tenure in specific jobs and even in specific careers. And so facilitating that move so that their next job is here versus losing that talent to a competitor is really a really good move. And I think it's something that everyone should be thinking about. And I know Caterpillar has amazing tenure within the organization because I think in large part to the career development.
Yeah, we generally have very long tenure in our company. And that's part of the reason when I talk about the placement, it's so important. We have people that have been employed for 10, 20, 30 plus years and haven't interviewed, haven't done a resume. They don't know how to look for a job. So that's one of the reasons that it's so important is that they're competitive internally with the external candidates because they haven't created the resume in a while.
So the third thing is to communicate authentically and with transparency. And I think this should be part of your culture, as just part of the norm. You see it says 75% of CEOs believe employee communication is the key driver to success. But I don't think that, even though I think people believe it, they don't always practice what they preach. And I think it's important for us as HR professionals to continue to encourage our senior leadership to be really transparent and communicative with the employees, especially when times are tough, right? This organization I was talking about earlier where this woman said to me, I'm sad that my job is going away, but I'm grateful for the support and I love this company and I hope that it gets healthy again. She wasn't blindsided by this news. She had seen it coming because the leadership of that organization had been communicating for a long time, like, things aren't going great. And we need everybody to pitch in. And people had been working really hard to try to turn that company around. But they also knew that in some ways the writing was on the wall because there had been this open, honest communication. And so I think that that is really, really important. And then I think during an event where you are having a layoff or a reorganization and people are losing their jobs, continuing to be really transparent and open and honest and letting people know what you're doing, letting the people you're not letting go know what you're doing to support the people that you are, really helps with morale. So another customer of ours, Fortune 500 company, actually split into two companies. And they had a lot of hiring to do, but they also had a lot of layoffs because of this. And one of the things that they did was they actually created formal communication around what they were partnering with us to do, and really kind of the severance package in general. And that communication was to the people they were trying to retain, because they wanted them to know, look, we are taking care of your friends. It sucks that we have to let them go, but we're going to take care of them, and we're doing right by them. And it was actually a great program, and people were uplifted by that. And there was excitement about the huge changes in the company, but I think people were really appreciative that, well, the people that were staying obviously were appreciative that they were keeping their jobs, but they were also really appreciative that they were given some insight into how well the company was taking care of the folks that were exiting. And I think that you guys do a lot of this as well, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a lot of communication, and I'll talk some about it. If we have a reorganization going on throughout the business unit. We have 30 different business units in the company. It's good to know if one business unit is struggling, the others are there to help pick up some of that slack. And so we spend a lot of time talking about that and trying to help in people situations, make sure that the other business units know where the talent is.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So prioritizing redeployment. This is something that a number of our customers do, and Caterpillar does a phenomenal job at it, and I'm going to turn this over to Mark in just a moment. But I think it's so important before you have a big announcement about a layoff that you have gotten your leadership together and really looked at where do we have hiring needs. If we're going to lay off 200 people or 300 people or 1,000 people, but we're also hiring 400 people, is there any overlap? Can we facilitate this? And is there a way that you can work with a partner to help you facilitate that? And then when you give people the news that their position is being eliminated, you can also tell them, however, there are positions available within the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Mark and let him tell you about Caterpillar's really fantastic program.
Well, again, just for those of you who know, I'm the corporate HR manager at Caterpillar, so I'm going to talk about priority candidate placement, but also I own all of the HR policies at Caterpillar. I own the compliance, I own internal investigations, all of the issues that arise when it comes to the Department of Labor. We get audits, we get all of that fun stuff as well. This program actually helps us with that, and I'll tie it in a little bit later as I get going. Only have a few slides. I'm going to start with our values, and you might ask, why do I start with the values? In reality, I've heard today many people talking about how people are their best asset. Well, we believe that. We actually have a strategic goal at Caterpillar, and it's not an HR goal, it's a company goal of best team. It's very simple, but basically it means people are our best asset. Well, if that's the case, we want to follow our values and treat them with integrity, excellence, teamwork, commitment, and sustainability. So we want to be, as Karen had mentioned, committed to them. We want to tell them what's happening up front. We want to talk to them honestly. So this really builds into every aspect we do and is one of the foundations for why we run the program. Now with this, before I get to the actual program, our placement program is only for good employees that are part of the best team. If they are poor performers, I own the performance management process as well. They need to be going through the performance management process. So the only people we accept into this, if you're a business unit HR, if you're a supervisor manager going through a situation where you're going to have excess employees, that could be due to a reorganization, it could be technological changes, it could be a whole number of reasons. It could be just that the employee has been with the company for 20 years and we put them in a job that's a bad fit for them. So now they need something a little different, but they've shown they're a really good employee. So they have to write a business case. The business case has to come to my team has to approve it, or they can't be in our program. So it's not everybody in. We really make sure that we're getting the people that are the best team for Caterpillar, that we want to keep them going forward in the company. So if it's a situation where the employee is just not performing, we're going to manage that in a separate process. So you can read on the screen what is, and PCPP, we love acronyms, but that's Priority Candidate Placement. What it generally is, and we are very unique, I believe, and I think we started with Rise Smart a couple of years ago. We've had this program for at least 6 years that I know of. About 2 years ago, I said it's time for a change, and it was a time for a change in the policy, the way we implemented it, and we ended up choosing a new vendor that would help us. And we came to them and said, we want to do this differently. We're looking for help. We're looking for a solution. What our solution was is we have a 6-month program. And I know that sounds extreme, but we have a 6-month program, and the program is broken up into different segments of us looking internally and looking externally. Rise Smart is with us on day 1. And what we do is once we've gone through the business plan, once we have the employee approved for it, we actually sit down, so day 0, we sit down with the supervisor and the HR person locally and help them explain the program and help them understand how to have the conversation with the employee. Once that's occurred, they then go on day 1 and have that conversation with the employee. Within 24 hours, my team is sitting and talking to the employee to explain the full program. Shortly thereafter, Rise Smart is contacting them to help them do resume writing, to help them build their skills, to help them talk about themselves. Because I said, we have long tenure. I've been with Caterpillar 15 years. Many people have been there 20, 30 plus years. They don't know how to write a resume. They don't know how to have an interview. They don't have a 20-second elevator speech. They need help with all those things. So what we do is during the first 3, and we tell this to the employees all up front, you have 4 months from today to find a job or we're going to separate you. And that's very hard, but there's lots of reasons why, but they know. They have 2 months after that, once we separate them, that Rise Smart then will help them with external placement. So during the first 90 days, so during the first 3 months, my team works to place them internally. However, during that time, they're working directly with Rise Smart on the resume writing skills, their conversation skills, interviewing skills, all of those things, because they have to compete internally, but they also are getting ready to compete externally in the marketplace that they probably haven't done in quite some time. So it becomes very important for them, especially as they're trying to market themselves. What we find is we have very engaged employees because they know they've got so much time to find a job. We have very engaged supervisors because the supervisor wants to help them find a job and doesn't want to have to end up with the separation at the end. And we have very engaged new supervisors as well at the end of it. So if we have an engaged employee and we have an engaged supervisor, we're generally very successful at finding a job. So what are the benefits? Why do we do this? I've already talked about some of them, but from the employee standpoint, they know up front exactly what's going to happen. They know from day 1 till the 4th month what they need to do, how they need to do it, what to prepare for, and they know on the 4th month what's going to happen. They then know they have 2 months externally if they get to that point. But as I mentioned before, we have 30 business units, and I'll use engineering for example. We're an engineering company for a lot of our products. If we change direction in something and we go from one division having, I'll say, 30 engineers to 20, most likely some of those other business units are hiring qualified, good engineers. If we have that person, why would we separate them, pay the cost of separation, maybe have a compliance issue, so we don't have to worry about any discrimination charges, and then pay the cost to rehire someone into the company. So that's really, when you look at the company benefits, it's reducing our financial burden, it's reducing liability, and it's hugely engaging to the employee. You have an employee that comes in and they're told their job's going to be eliminated, and 60 days later we have them a new job and it's in an area they want to do, it's in the same type of work. They're newly fully engaged and on board and excited. You have a new supervisor who, as many of you know, hiring someone can be problematic, can take time, who just creates a rec. When all recs are created before they get posted internally and externally in my company, we have somebody that reviews those for our people that are priorities first. If we have someone that's a priority, we'll match that up to the supervisor. If the supervisor interviews and likes them, we don't have to post. They can go directly into the job. The supervisor now has an employee probably within days or weeks instead of months, and the employee is ready to go. Their job's been eliminated or they're no longer in that position. They're ready to go into new jobs. So you end up with a supervisor that's happy. They got a good employee that's been long-standing with the company. They've got someone right now, they can go. So those are kind of the overall benefits of our program. And I know it's very unique, but it's served us well. And we've actually had employees leave the company through the process, get severed, and later come back to Caterpillar at some point in time, because again, they understand at the end that we've done everything we can, they've done everything they can in order to find a good solution to the problem. So that's kind of our story of how we've gotten to where we are, what we do. Any questions for me before I turn it back over to Karen? Way in the back.
Once you've had your meeting with your employee and they're informed that in 6 months their job is going to be eliminated, they'll be outplaced, do they have free time to be working on their resume, do job interviews, or are they also doing their own job during that time?
And that really depends. In some cases, the job's gone that day. And in that case, we then try to, usually there's project work that can be done. We can always find projects for people, there's work to be done. So in some cases, they're doing project work, which allows them time as well. In other cases, they are still doing their job. However, their supervisor is fully aware of the situation they're in as well, and the supervisor does give them time. They are spending time with Rise Smart. They are spending time doing their own internal networking. The supervisors actually spend a huge amount of time doing networking for them. We find the supervisors to be fully engaged in the process because, again, they don't want to have to sit down with that employee in 4 months and walk them out the door. So it ends up being a very much two-way street with the current supervisor and the employee. Yes, sir. You can yell it out if you want.
Thank you. In the case, you explained the in-placement, I think you called it, where employees have the opportunity to apply for and compete for opportunities internally. Does that apply to anybody, regardless of their past performance?
No. The first step into the process is if they're not a good performer, we don't take them into our process. So the very first step is my team, I own performance management, I own this process. So the business unit has to create a business case as to why this group of jobs are being eliminated. It's not about the employee, it's a group of jobs. Why is this need? If we accept it, then they come into the plan. One of the main questions is performance, and we review performance as well. And if they're not performing, I'm not gonna take an employee that's not performing well and take them from one business and give them to another supervisor. That's not the goal of the plan. So if they don't meet that threshold, we don't accept them in, they have to go through performance management. Any other questions for me? Okay, if not, I'll give it back to Karen. We'll have time at the end as well.
Yeah, we'll take more questions at the end. So the last, well, actually the second to last, I have a bonus tip after this one. But providing really strong transition assistance, I think, is an important component of this. And I don't just mean having an outplacement provider in place. Having a package that is competitive, having someone from your EAP on site, not having an armed security guard standing around. I know in some situations it may call for security, but what I've noticed is that when I've been there to support companies that I think maybe could use some work on their processes, a lot of times they'll have, a security card with a badge and a gun, and he's standing by the door and making sure that there's, everybody's going to behave themselves. Whereas with companies that are more I think having these best practices, they may have security, but you don't see them, right? They're in plain clothes, they're kind of hidden. So there is a need for that, but obviously doing it in such a way that you want these people who are getting this message that their positions are being eliminated, that you respect them. You want to treat them with dignity and respect and have a graceful exit. And so everything you do should be around kind of maintaining that dignity and that respect. And so really planning the event out. And something that I get really passionate about is training your managers who have to deliver this message. All too often, I have seen companies, they put together their talking points for the managers, and the training just goes over the talking points, and they hand them the talking points, and they say, try not to read it, right? And what's really important to acknowledge is that that person, that manager who has to go and give that message is scared and probably angry themselves that they have to deliver this news that they didn't really have a choice in. And you know, there's a lot of angst going on. And so giving them a training that helps them reflect on that and gives them the courage to go into that meeting and deliver this message of, hey, your position has been eliminated, treating that person across the desk from them with dignity and respect and compassion without commiserating, right? Because the last thing you want your managers doing is going, I know, believe me, if it was up to me, I wouldn't be, I think you're great. That's the last thing you want them saying, right? You want them to say, I realize this is very difficult news to hear. What questions do you have for me right now, right? And so training them to recognize that they are going to be nervous, scared, angry, resentful, that they have to give this message, and acknowledging that as an organization, being transparent with them. We know that we're asking you to do something really hard, but it's part of your responsibility as a manager to go in there and do it in the best interest of the company and maintaining the respect for the person, but without letting your own feelings kind of emote out during this. And I know we actually did a train the trainer with Mark's group. Yep. And
no, absolutely. We started out with here's a bullet pointed list, stick to it and move on, which I'd say we moved away from some. I mean, we still want to give them material. However, we do spend a good amount of time with them. Like I said, the day before they talk to the employee, we give them time to soak it in a little bit. We talk to them. We get their local HR person in the room with them. Sometimes, we've had supervisors that are also being impacted if it's a complete reorganization, which can make it even more challenging. But in any situation, it's very stressful for them, and it's okay to be stressed. It's okay to be upset a little bit, but helping them helping them to understand how to have the conversation and how to get out of the conversation
right.
are big keys as well. So we spend that time the day before.
Yeah. And actually one of the great ways to get out of that conversation is to provide them with a tool to give to the person that's going to help them with their transition, which is where we come in. So having really strong communication materials and notification packets that actually have information in there about how you're going to find your next job. And usually in that conversation, the person is so emotional, they're not hearing everything, right? So having something in the packet that's really kind of pops out like, hey, there's going to be a program here for you that's going to help you transition to a new role. And one of the things that we have found is this is really a great way for managers to transition out of that conversation and end the meeting. Go ahead and get started with this. And people really appreciate having a little bit of an uplift at the end, that there is going to be a resource in place for me.
I would just say on that, it helps at the end if you give them some information, tell them to read through it, tell them what's coming, and let them know you will get a phone call or you will be reached out to by whether it's someone on my team or RiseSmart. Within 24 hours, you're going to get a call.
Yeah.
Or we're going to set up a time. Then at least they know something else is coming. So you're not just shutting the door and walking out. they know there's a next step.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, when you're looking at outplacement providers, one of the things that I would encourage all of you to do is to ask them about their results. What are how do you keep in touch with my former employees and make sure that they are landing? Ask them that question and make sure that they have a really strong answer for you there. So I think the final piece is it's important to nurture alumni relationships. And I think a lot of times organizations worry about formally engaging people that they laid off in their alumni community, right? Because you think, we're not sure that is the best thing to do. We laid them off. They're probably mad. They don't want to be in our alumni program. But you know what? They may want to be in your alumni program. And if you've done all these things that we've been talking about today, they are going to want to be in your alumni program. And is Barry Diamond here? No, he's not here? Okay. So yesterday, Barry gave me a great idea, and I told him if he came to my talk, I'd give him credit for it, but so this is my idea. No, he was saying that he thought it would be great for companies to give an Alumni of the Year award. And I think that's fantastic, because like I said in the beginning of the talk, where are your former employees going to go? They're going to go to the competition, or they're going to go to your customers, or they're going to go to your vendors. And recognizing them for the position that they hold now, especially if they work at one of your customers, and giving them the Alumni of the Year award, I think is just such a great idea. So I'm stealing that one. But really staying in communication with your alumni, and this ties into your recruiting group, right? And making sure that your talent acquisition group and even your marketing. I was at another conference last week, and I heard someone say, employer brand and brand are the same thing. And they really are, right? So working with marketing, working with talent acquisition, making sure that those alumni are aware of all the cool things that the company is doing. And I would be so bold as to suggest that you extend your employer referral bonuses to your alumni. Does anybody do that? One hand. I think does it work well? Yeah. It's cheaper than a recruiter, for sure. That's why you do it with employees, right? And it keeps that relationship going with your alumni. So using LinkedIn for that, having a formal alumni group on LinkedIn, and continuing to nurture that relationship. What a great talent pool for your talent acquisition group, people who have already worked for you. And I know, Mark, you were mentioning to me at breakfast that you have people that will leave for 2 years and come back, right?
We have that quite a bit, where we have people that will seek greener pastures and then come back at some later point in time. And so we don't have a specific referral program, but especially for the high talent people, the jobs that are specific niche areas, we tend to match up someone to call them every once in a while.
The question I have is, the size of layoffs that Caterpillar normally does is quite large. Like last year, it's like 10%, 13,000 employees through Virginia and in Milwaukee. So how does this program tie into the size and scope of reductions? Do you meet with every employee and through your PCPP?
13,000 people did not come through our program.
Yeah.
No, it's usually a fairly small
thinking,
number.
'cause it's large.
And the layoffs that were occurring, when you talk about layoffs, they can be short-term, long-term, indefinite, and then you have separations, I guess, is category. Most of what we had last year was short-term. So in those cases, it was much more of the process we follow is my team still has to approve every single layoff, every single separation, every one of them. So we have to have a business case as to why we're doing it. And again, that comes back more to compliance at the end to make sure we're following a standardized process and we're looking at jobs, not people, when we're doing that. So it's a very important process. But in the end, when it comes to if we're shutting down a factory for 2 weeks, then the local HR team will approve that can be done. But the local HR team will then allow them to handle the communications to the employees. But at that point, the employee will know, we're shutting down for 2 weeks, you're coming back in 2 weeks. Or we're shutting down or your job's being eliminated, but it's short term. We don't have an end date, but we'll stay in contact with you and we expect it to return. So It depends on the conversation. If it's going through an actual separation and we know that, then yes, my team will be heavily involved.
So I have two questions for Mark. That is
Yeah.
loud. So the first one is, do you ever have employees opt out of the program and just ask for a severance instead? And is that an option? And the second one is, with the performance management piece, how are you measuring that? Is it, there's documented performance management issues? Because I would imagine that there are managers that say, well, this person's not performing,
Right.
but
Well,
their
well,
their most recent performance
we
review might
actually have
indicate
the
something
opposite
different.
issue. We actually have the manager saying, oh, this person's great, because they want to take the easy way out, frankly. We have to sit down and talk with them, and we look at their performance over a time frame. So we don't just look at this quarter, how are they doing? We want to make sure we look at, are they performing a good job over a good, steady time frame? So in a case where it's a mismatch, where maybe I'm an ex-finance person, and so I moved from finance to HR. If all of a sudden I move from finance to HR and I'm in HR and it's just not working, I'm not an HR person. But I was a great finance person. We're going to look back and say, okay, can we move you back into that type of role? So it really depends. So on that situation, the HR stuff, we would say, you're failing. However, you were great as a finance person. That's why we gave you this opportunity. We don't want to lose you in that case. On the other side, if I've been in the same job for a long period, we're going to look at that period of time. But we're not going to do it based on performance management. I know you had a second piece. What was the?
And it was about, can people just do out?
Can people, yes.
It depends.
If we meet with them on day one and we've had people say, you know what, I'm just going to retire. That occurs, or I'm going to quit, I'm going to go work somewhere else. It can happen, yes. Generally, they don't opt out because they might as well stay in the program and frankly see if they can find something, and they still get the benefits of Rise Smart while they're in the program. So generally, they'll stay and look, and we've had people that say, I'm going to leave, and they stay and they find something, they're incredibly engaged because now they're doing what we want. We've had some people that we've taken from a production environment and we've made them managers, leaders in an environment, and they've come into the program and they realize, you know what, this management isn't really for me. I want to go back to the production environment. So they really do opt out of the program because we don't do it for production, but then they will go back into what they really want. So
And
it's
there
really
have been
a choice.
a few cases, if you don't mind my talking about it, but there have been a few cases over the 2 years that we've worked together where there have been people who Mark's team has said, you know what, candidly, this person actually has had great performance reviews, so we want to accept them into the program, but there isn't going to be a role for them at
Right.
Caterpillar, so instead they get a 6-month outplacement program instead of having to do the first 4 months of in-placement.
And we've had employees approach us that say, you know, I'm working with Rise Smart today, I'm really enjoying that, and I've come to the point in my life, this isn't what I want. I want to move to such and such location, and we don't have a job for it there. Then they're kind of opting out, and they'll go directly with Rise Smart at that point. But we have 120,000 people. I can't manage 120,000 people. So it ends up being, because we have that front end piece that manages who comes in and manages how it happens, it ends up being a fairly small program that can be handled by my team. And then hugely by Rise Smart as far as, once we get them in the door, once they start the program, most of the interaction is with Rise Smart and then someone on my team for jobs.